many of you will undoubtedly know, Liam Gallagher is the former singer of Oasis and BDI, now a solo artist. His relationships dragged through the mud, his very well-known split with his brother. Basically, his personal life has been in the spotlight a considerable amount over the last few years. Because of his fame, he is sometimes dragged into things he doesn't understand, which will become apparent in a moment. He is, to me, the cliché, non-existent voter, in that he pays virtually no attention to politics, yet he keeps getting asked for his opinion on things happening in politics. So take a recent interview with the BBC, and I'm going to play a very short clip of it before we address another quote he said in the interview.
I'm not into politics and all that, but I do keep an eye on it, but I don't know much about Brexit and that, but every time you wake up in the morning, there's some 16-year-old kid being knifed to death, and I've got kids that are that age, you know what I mean? Out and about, going, doing their thing, you know what I mean? Living, being young and all that, so that freaks me right out.
Now, another thing he said in the interview that I think is of importance, I'm not going to play the clip of, is where he took a swipe at Sadiq Khan, where he said, "I'd have a word with that mayor. He seems to not be doing a good job. All them kids getting knifed and all that. The only thing that ever comes out of his mouth is, London is open. What? Open for knife crime and dying and stuff?" This comes after 4 people within 4 days in London put knife crime in the capital in the international spotlight, which even got Donald Trump criticising Khan. That said, Trump doesn't need an excuse to criticise Khan, he'll do it anyway. So much so that they basically throw shade at each other on Twitter all the time. And let's not forget here, Sadiq Khan was too much of a coward to go see him when he visited. The current scale of the problem in London is that 35% of all knife crime in the UK is committed in London, which is a damning statement. The number of NHS admissions, aged 10 to 19, has risen by 60% in 5 years, surpassing 1,000 last year alone. The number of knife and offensive weapon offences in England and Wales has risen to its highest level for nearly a decade, with it being up more than a third since 2015. And sentences handed out show that 22,041 knife and weapon offences led to convictions by March of this year, which is the highest rate since 2010, where the rate was 23,667. Now typically, and this is certainly proven with statistics from the Office of National Statistics and, of course, from the Ministry of Justice, 37% of knife and weapon offences, or offensive weapon offences, resulted in immediate custodial sentences, up from 22% in 2009 when the data was first published. The average length of custodial terms has gone from 5.5 months to 8.1 months. The number of juvenile offenders has also gone up, increased by half between the year of 2015 and now 2019. The increase in adult offenders was smaller, but it's still up by 31%, and they still accounted for 74% of the total increase in cautions and convictions received for those offences. From what I can see, from what I see when Sadiq Khan is on Twitter, when he's doing interviews, and I'm not playing them because copyright everywhere, he always seems to talk about how London is open, which is what Liam Gallagher said, but he also goes on about how the only way to truly tackle extremism and this knife epidemic is by further integrating communities. I find this to be somewhat contradictory, with each community having their own values and cultures and putting them all together, because there's going to have to be some give and take and there's going to be some pushback. I don't believe further integration is the issue. You yourself, Sadiq Khan, that is, talk about how money is the issue, something which the government does now recognise, where they've now put a further 100 million into police forces in England and Wales, but then when you stretch that money out, it doesn't go as far as you think. It doesn't. Some of that money, after all, is allocated elsewhere. So Chancellor Philip Hammond, when pledging 100 million, not as impressive. Although, many would say we do need more police officers on the streets. With the removal of random stop and searches, more people are able to carry knives freely because they aren't as much of a high risk of being stopped and searched, which I personally believe we should bring back. People think there's a racial element to it. Well, that wouldn't be because the majority of the crimes being committed happen to be happening in certain ethnic communities. I'm trying very hard not to be racist, but the statistics don't lie. That said, random stop searches should happen regardless, if it is a deterrent, and does collect a considerable amount of rather offensive weaponry, including butter knives. 10,000 knives were seized during a week-long national crime event crackdown, where officers carried out 3,771 weapons searches, during which 342 knives were found. Another 10,215 were handed in as part of amnesties. And a new Offensive Weapons Act was passed in May of 2019, which made it illegal to possess knuckle dusters, zombie knives, and Death Star knives. And it also made it a criminal offence to dispatch bladed products that are sold online without verifying that the buyer is over 18. A spokesperson for Sadiq Khan did say something when they heard this, and they said tackling violent crime is the mayor's highest priority. Doubt. He has invested record amounts in the Met. Not true. Including funding the Violent Crime Task Force of nearly 300 officers dedicated to tackling violence. That sounds like a... I'm going to sound like a nihilist for a second. That sounds like a lost cause. Why don't you just invest it in the police? Don't need dedicated people for that. However, he can't fill the huge hole left by devastating government cuts to the police. Cuts have consequences, which is the final part of a quote from the article I've linked below. Let's just talk about that. Cuts have consequences. Okay, consequences have cuts. It works the other way. In fact, it's because of the consequences that cuts need to happen. And because of the cuts, there are consequences. It's almost like cause and effect, really, isn't it? And as a final point, Sadiq Khan, you were an MP when Labour were in Parliament. I didn't see you doing much in the way of dealing with the fact that they were blowing money we didn't have to the point where austerity had to happen. Instead, you just blamed the government because austerity had to happen. You're an embarrassment at this point. And quite frankly, you should be doing more to tackle knife crime instead of talking about integrated communities and bleating on about no-deal Brexit being the literal apocalypse. Grow up.
But if I did see a politician taking drugs, man, he'd get a crack round the head. What are you doing, you donut?